Hello, reporter room investigators. Great to see you. Hi, Enjaz. This is our head mod, Enjaz. Hello, brother Mike. Come on in, come on in. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the roommates, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen. I've got some new information from Judge Hippler to share with you guys. We're going to be talking about the 12 motions from Ann Taylor. She filed 12 motions to remove evidence from Bryan Kohberger's trial. What were the motions and what clues do those give us as to what evidence is going to be presented at the trial? Should be a really interesting live stream. We're going to talk about what Bethany witnessed and what the sourcing is on that. And we're also going to talk about Dylan. How will her drinking affect her testimony? Will the judge let her testify or not? We're going to dive into that. We're also going to talk about some defense tactics. And, it's Ann Taylor is doing a great job defending Bryan Kohberger. So we're going to look at all of the different motions that she has filing to suppress and consider what we know about the case so far and what this might mean for the defense team and also for the prosecution, and what clues can we get from these 12 motions that Ann Taylor filed as to what evidence the defense team wants excluded and what evidence the prosecution might have in this case. So my name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So I see we have Dabs is here and Sue Joy is here. Welcome. I'm glad you guys made it today. We're going to have, let's go ahead and get started. Let me move myself out of the way here. We have so much stuff to get into, and we have new information from the judge today. So much stuff going on. As I was literally getting ready for this live stream, more information kept coming in. So let me go ahead and move myself out of the way, if I can remember how to do it. Oh, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I guess I have to save that. Okay, can you guys see me and hear me okay? Can you guys all hear me? Yeah, please give it a thumbs up on your way in so YouTube knows we're okay. Okay, I got to move myself. Let's try this one. There, I like that. Okay, let me back this up. We're going to start with this video.
To show a motive to get a conviction for first-degree murder. Juries want to know the motive, especially when they see this clean-cut guy with no criminal background. They want to know why he did it. Now, I think it's coming into focus why he did it. He seemed to be a devotee of serial killers and crime. I mean, he studied under the BTK's autobiographer. I mean, he was so interested in true crime that it looks like he wanted to be the center of his.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
So this is the affidavit. And okay, so we're going to start off talking about something that's been being discussed a lot in chat rooms and in the comment section below. A lot of people were asking me, did I watch the hearings? Yes, I did. I did watch the hearings. Thank you so much, Brother Mike, for the kind super sticker. I really appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. Hi, Pepper. Good to see you. And thank you, Brother Mike, again. Hi, Dabs. Okay, so we're going to start off with this affidavit. Now, this affidavit was filed by an investigator working for Ann Taylor. And it goes together with an article that I'm going to share with you from the Mirror. And basically, let me go ahead and play this for you so you can just kind of know where we are, because this was groundbreaking information for a lot of people who are not members of Reporter Room or haven't been subscribed to this channel very long. This was filed by Richard Bittoni. He was a criminal investigator and may still be for the defense team representing Bryan Kohberger. And he talks about being appointed by Ann Taylor to investigate the alleged incident which led to the arrest of Bryan Kohberger. And he talks about 4 counts of first-degree M, I'm watching my words here, and 1 count of burglary, and what happened at the 1122 King Road house. And then if you go down to item 7, you'll see that he talks about Bethany Funk's bedroom being on the first floor. And item 8, which is the other surviving roommate's bedroom, was on the 2nd floor. So we know that is Dylan. So Bethany, he says in number 9, Bethany Funk was interviewed by police on several occasions. She disclosed things she heard and saw. Bethany Funk was present at the home 8 hours later when the police arrived at the scene and discovered the crimes. I'm watching my words. On number 11, he says, during the course of my investigation, it became known to me that Bethany Funk had information material to the charges against Mr. Kohberger. Portions of information Ms. Funk has is exculpatory to the defendant. Ms. Funk's information is unique to her experiences and cannot be provided by another witness. And Bethany Funk resides in the state of Nevada, and it's necessary to subpoena this witness because the witness's testimony is material and necessary to the case. This was dated March 22nd, 2023. So now let's go over to the Mirror article, which is titled "The Surviving Roommate in the University of Idaho Stabbings Begs Not to Face, quote, Killer in Court." And it talks about the preliminary hearing, which was going to occur on the week of June 26th. But after we got as we got closer to the date, we learned that there was not going to be a preliminary hearing on June 26th. So let me pull that article up for you next. And I just want to show it to you where you can actually go through the article with me. That's one of the nice things about doing a live stream. So let me grab that and then we'll continue the video in just a second. All right, let me make sure I'm showing you. Okay, so this is the article that I'm referencing in this little video. I put together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 packages plus a video for you guys today. So this is the article that I'm referencing. It was put out by the Mirror, and they're referencing the affidavit. So what did we learn from the hearings we learned some information about Dylan, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but we also learned some information about Bethany that confirms what I covered in this article, that Bethany Funk, one of the 2 survivors, did hear or witness things that could have potentially exonerate BK. Now, this is the defense team thinking that it was going to potentially exonerate him. I think it could go either way, because what she allegedly witnessed was a man, and I'm watching my words here, without anything on, running through the rear sliding door, and she had come up from the ground floor. And so she would have come face to face with the perpetrator. And we are talking about this case today in terms of Bryan Kohberger. He is innocent until proven guilty. But since he's his team, his defense team, are the one filing all this motions, and it's his investigator for Ann Taylor investigator that's being referenced. We are going to talk about this case in terms of him. But Bethany's alleged to have heard or seen things that could clear the suspect. This is what the defense team investigator, Mr. Bittoni, argued will be a crucial witness. Now, they were really upset because Bethany did not want to sit down with them at the preliminary trial. If you've been on this case for as long as I have, I think I've made over 130 videos on this case, then you know that we were originally supposed to have a preliminary trial. And then we found out as we got closer to the preliminary trial that it actually a grand jury. So I think Bethany didn't want to sit down with Ann Taylor and her private investigator, not because she was trying to hide something from the defense team, but because she knew there was no preliminary trial. But they said, if she refuses to appear at the preliminary trial, she could face a potential fine of $500 or 25 days in jail. Now, this came up again during Judge Hippler's hearing, where he addressed this too, a man that was seen dropping some items into a brown paper bag. Well, this is a theory that I had put forward with you guys last year, that I believe that the man was the same man that Dylan saw, and that the perpetrator stripped off his monkey suit, dropped it into a brown paper bag, and then exited through the sliding glass doors. Now, so a lot of people have gotten confused. They thought maybe because one person was described wearing all black and a mask, and, was athletic, but not muscular, and around 6 feet tall. That's who Dylan saw. And then Bethany saw someone who was stripping off things and dropping them into a brown paper bag, that maybe those weren't the same people, or maybe there was two people. But I believe it was the same person that went to the patio doors, stripped off the monkey suit, dropped it into a brown paper bag in order to stop DNA being transferred from the crime scene into the vehicle. Now, Mr. Bertoni wrote in the affidavit, and again, this is the affidavit I just showed you, and then this is referenced by the Mirror in an article that is dated April of 2023. So he wrote, during the course of my investigation, it has become known to me that he's talking about Bethany here, has information material to the charges against Mr. Kohberger. According to the police, it was Ms. Funk who found the bodies of her housemates, but she is now disputing the request to appear, as she now lives in Nevada, not Idaho. I think probably it's more likely she was disputing the request to appear because she already had testified for the grand jury and knew there wasn't a preliminary hearing. But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion. And I am sharing, my opinion on this case. Her lawyer wrote, there is, quote, no authority for Idaho criminal defendant to summon a Nevada witness, this is Bethany's lawyer, to an Idaho matter without a hearing, and there is no authority to summon a Nevada witness to an Idaho matter without a Nevada judge making a find of materiality, necessity, and lack of undue hardship. So it just seems like she didn't want to, give forth her evidence, but she did ultimately meet with the defense team. So they rejected this on the grounds that it was a foreign subpoena. And they had to go to court and have Bethany to ask for her to testify. Ultimately, without this having to be adjudicated by the judge, Bethany did agree to sit down with the defense team. So let's go back to the video for a second. The prosecution had already had a grand jury hearing. Now, the investigator, Richard Bertoni, is also referenced in this Mirror article, and I will link it for you in the description below. He's working for Ann Taylor. Mr. Kohberger's lawyer has subpoenaed Ms. Funk to appear at BK's hearing on June 28th. According to the affidavit, she allegedly witnessed a man who was not wearing anything, I'm watching my words here, run through a rear sliding door. She lived on the first floor of the home and came face to face with the alleged perpetrator. Again, I'm watching my words. She is alleged to have heard or saw things that could clear the suspect, as Mr. Bertoni argued, will be a crucial witness. Okay, so I shared with you at the time, and I still believe today, that Bethany saw the same person that Dylan saw, and what she saw, and the judge confirmed this in the hearing, Judge Hippler. And there's new information from Judge Hippler that we're going to talk about next, and then we're going to get into the 12 motions from Ann Taylor and look at what information, what evidence are revealed through her motion, and then we're going to talk about Dylan, her drinking, and how this could impact her testimony. So let's go with the judge's new information next. Let me take this down, and I will post that video in its entirety probably tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. Let me grab this next. I have like so many packages to share, but this is new information today from Judge Hippler. Okay, so new information to be made public. It was published today at 7 p.m. So he was, Ann Taylor and BK were in court. They were doing motions. Ann Taylor had 12 motions that she has evidence that she wants, and we're going to go through those in a few minutes. But on Monday, District Judge Hippler, Stephen Hippler, that's the new judge that replaced John Judge. Sorry, the old judge from Latah County was named judge. So, but we have a new one in the Ada County in Boise, Idaho. That's Judge Stephen Hippler. He ordered that the court reporter assigned to the hearing to prepare a verbatim transcript. So we're going to get a transcript, because remember, the hearing, people were like, did you watch the hearing? Did you watch the hearing? I'm like, yeah, but we didn't see, like 6.5 hours of the hearing. It was closed to the public. So to disclose everything, because, the reason we aren't able to see some of this information is because the defense team requested a gag order be put on the case to protect Bryan Kohberger's right to a fair trial. So now the prosecution and the defense he's going to release a transcript of the portion of the trial, of the hearing that occurred last week. We're going to get to read about it. The prosecution and the defense are going to be given 14 days to identify the parts that they feel should be redacted from the public. So in other words, the judge is not going to approve anything that's going to impair BK's right to a fair trial. Now, the order comes after multiple media organizations, including ABC, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, the New York Times, all motioned, asking to see. We want to see what's going on, in the interest of fairness. We want to know. And I think there was a lot of frustration in the Delphi case, where Judge Frances Gull really did keep us from seeing the trial. She didn't allow a transcript from the trial. And I really like Judge Hippler. He's putting as much of the hearings out publicly as possible, to make sure that, Bryan's right to a speedy trial is not impaired. But he's balancing that, which was requested by the defense team. That's why we have a gag order on it. And he's balancing that, though, with the public's right to know and to have some transparency, so nobody feels like it is super secret, which is what, Ann Taylor is saying. That he does, he wants to have full transparency. So both the prosecution and defense presented arguments on evidence related motions. So we're going to get to read some of that. And the defense motions to suppress, they want to suppress, which just is a fancy way of saying they don't want the jury to see large portions of evidence ahead of the upcoming trial. So we're going to go through those in just a second. And then we're going to talk about Dylan and some new revelations with her, including the DNA taken from the crime scene, items seized from BK's car and college apartment, and information from his cell phone and his online footprint. So she doesn't want any of that to come in. So, everything that the defense is trying to keep out, I'm, thinking that's bad for Bryan Kohberger, and everything that the prosecution, so I think it's worth going through it to see, well, does she not want the public, or especially the jury, to see? I don't think we need to go through who Bryan Kohberger is. I think we know who Bryan Kohberger is. So let me go ahead and grab this for you, and then let's go through this. Let me pop this back up. Lawyers claim Ms. Funk has exculpatory evidence. So I'm not going to play all of this, because I literally went through the article, which I think is easier than reading it. I did put it here. Okay, so we're going to talk about, let me just pull these up. We're going to talk about the case, but we're also going to be talking about the roommates, because this was a big part of the hearing. And, I'm really anxious to see, what it is that we missed out on. So let's go ahead and go through that part next. And then we're going to talk about Dylan and how this impacts, how the fact that she was drinking, how this is going to impact this. So first of all, let's talk about the motions of information that Ann Taylor does not want the jury to see. And I'm assuming it's because it's bad for Bryan Kohberger, right? If it was good for him, she would want to see it. And this is probably why we weren't allowed to see all of the hearings, but he is going to send out a transcript, but allow the defense to redact it and the prosecution to redact it to protect Bryan Kohberger. So the genealogy, that's the IgG DNA evidence, Now, that's not being presented at the trial, but Ann Taylor really wants to have this IgG genealogy DNA. That's the DNA they collected from the garbage can that matched, that was uploaded to one of these ancestry DNA sites by one of BK's ancestors or relatives. She wants that thrown out. She wants the fact that the FBI and the police were able to get that from the trash man that picked up Bryan Kohberger's parents' garbage. That's where they got the DNA from, and they matched, ran it through. The DNA from the knife sheath was matched twice. It was matched running through one of these ancestry DNA places. So that said, oh, this ancestor or relative is related to BK's father, Michael Kohberger. So that's how that came up. But she wants that suppressed because if she can get that thrown out, she can get the arrest thrown out, and then the cheek swab DNA, which was obtained with a warrant from Bryan Kohberger, she could get that thrown out. She could get the evidence that was collected at his parents' house thrown out. So you can see why, she's tried with Latah County Judge John Judge also to get this thrown out. He denied it. I'm like curious if you guys think that what this judge is going to decide, in watching the hearing and listening to how he was questioning both Ann Taylor and with this IgG, which I did in the video titled Super Secret that I posted on Sunday. You guys can go through that. I'm not going to rehash it here, but I think that, it's going to be very unlikely, in my opinion, that he wants to get it thrown out. But Ann Taylor is doing a good job. Her job is to defend Bryan Kohberger. So she's doing a good job of trying to get, everything thrown out that she can. So I put that in Sunday's video. It's got a thumbnail. It's a super secret on it. So the bottom line is Ann Taylor really wants to get the DNA evidence thrown out because the DNA evidence matches Bryan Kohberger to the octillion, not million, not billion, but octillion's 8. And that's almost more than there are people living on the planet. Now, that DNA that's being presented that matched Bryan Kohberger in the octillion, that was the cheek swab that was collected by law enforcement. That was collected by law enforcement after they arrested him. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, law enforcement wants the evidence from Ann Taylor wants the evidence that was collected from BK's car thrown out. I thought this was really interesting. I'm going to check in with chat after we do this little section. I thought this was really interesting because Ann Taylor, in one of her other motions that she said there was no DNA evidence found in BK's car. So I don't know if that means there was no DNA found by her investigators or if there was no DNA found by law enforcement. I don't know what that means yet. I think we're going to have to, see if we can find out some more once the judge releases the hearing transcript. I'll be going through that in a live stream with you guys. But she said she did not find any she didn't find any DNA evidence. That's what she says. Law enforcement didn't. But it seems like there was some evidence that law enforcement did find in BK's car. So, I was trying to go through and think, well, what is it? Is it fibers that maybe link back to one of the victims, or a hair that links back to one of the victims? Is it something like that? Fibers that came from inside the house that links back to the crime scene, or is it something more benign, like he had a shovel in the trunk? We know that. Is it just, she doesn't want the shovel admitted? But remember, the prosecution is putting together a largely circumstantial case, right? We don't have a witness that witnessed him doing the crime. So it's going to be piece by piece, brick by brick, similar to how we saw them build the Delphi case with Richard Allen, which, if you want me to cover that, I will. There's been a lot of controversy around that case and that trial, and I get it. I feel like there wasn't enough transparency with the public. So what do you think was in the trunk or in the car that was in Bryan Kohberger's car that, is that the, and keep out? My thought is that there may be some fibers, even though there's not DNA, there may be some fibers that link back to clothing that belonged to one of the victims or something like that. Let me know. Next, we're going to talk about the AT&T motion. Ann Taylor does not want the AT&T cell phone. Now that's the cell phone provider for Bryan Kohberger. So we're going to talk about that next and what that could reveal. But let me just say hello to chat. This is a live stream and I do want to be polite. I'm so glad you guys are here. Come on into the top chat. I just want to say hi to Pepper and Wickred. This is our head mod. This is NJAS. Thank you so much to all of our mods, all of our subscribers, all of our channel members. Yeah, please. Okay. So thank you for smashing the like button. And hi, Villainous Cupcake. What a cute handle name. I'm having trouble. There it goes. Clifton Mayo. I think I logged out for a second. Rayanne is here. Welcome, everybody. Liar Slayer. She gave the perfect description, matching DNA on the sheath, yet Kohberger said bad things about the survivors. Yeah. It's Judge Hippler is the judge in this case. Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate it. Yeah, all the comments are welcome. Just please be respectful. If you know, you can say something in a constructive way, or you can say something that's like gaslighting or deconstructive. Hi, Santos. Hi. So come on in, you guys. And then we're going to go through the next one. I want to go through that. Hi, Veronica. But I just do want to say hello to chat. I haven't had a chance to interact with you. Thank you, Brother Mike. Hi, DM. All right. So I hope I'm like kind of caught up. But please drop your questions for me. I'll be taking questions after we go through a couple more things. I want to see what you guys think about this. Hi, Mayor C. Good to see you. Hi, Patricia. Hi, Jeff. Awesome to see you today. Okay. So let's dig into the next bit. And we're going to go through the motions, what this reveals to us, and then we're going to talk about Dylan and the drinking. How much of a problem is this going to be for the prosecution? I think it is a problem. We're going to talk about how much of a problem, and we're going to also look at some defense tactics that we're seeing being used by Ann Taylor, who's a very skilled defense attorney, and then how prosecution can overcome them. But this will keep, if you guys like to have all the information so you can make up your own mind about the case, you're in the right place. So the AT&T, if you've been with me and if you haven't watched my live streams that I did in January, February, and March of 2024, you might want to go through a couple of those live streams. I deep dive into all of this stuff. So BK used AT&T as a cell phone provider. So that is one of her motions, is she wants the judge to throw that out. So what is she worried about them seeing? Well, let's consider what the cell phone records could reveal about Bryan Kohberger and his movements leading up to the crime. We know that they have cell phone tower pings that show him visiting the crime scene 12 times leading up to and the morning of when the crime scene was discovered, right? And then we have they have him on CCTV cameras going to, and cell phone tower pings going to the crime scene, right? And leaving from the crime scene. And I think it's going to be a little bit suspicious, maybe to the jury, that the cell phone gets turned off right during the actual crime. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I think that if I were like on the jury, I would think that would be a little bit weird. Like, why is the cell phone turned off right during the crime and then turned back on after? But law enforcement, this could reveal even more information. We know some of the apps that were on his phone, including TikTok, Snapchat and Strava, reveal a lot, right? They reveal a lot. We also know that law enforcement got from his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, that there was a tablet that was collected. And so they also got some medical grade gloves. And this was really wild, a DNA kit. Bryan Kohberger had his own DNA kit on him. I found that really interesting. So now let's talk about what the what law enforcement might have gotten off of his phone, that AT&T phone that she wants to have suppressed. So if she doesn't get that suppressed, then she wants to get the app suppressed. But let's first talk about geofencing, right? We saw this play a role in the Delphi case with Richard Allen. And I shared with you that I thought that the cell phone tower pings that law enforcement was going to be using, this will not be the only thing that puts him visiting that crime scene multiple times. I think there's also going to be uh, doorbell cams and some dash cam on the day of the crime and the morning of the crime. It of him going to and from the crime scene. We know Ann Taylor slipped up in court. She admitted, I have a video on that, we're proving that she admitted that the Hyundai Elantra was Bryan Kohberger's car. I suspect that the searches that were done on Bryan's AT&T phone might not be favorable to Bryan Kohberger, but it could also go to the geofencing. And I told you at the time that Bryan Kohberger was that we believe, law enforcement believes, he was sitting in that apartment complex, right? A lot, right at the back of the house. And Brian Enton showed us, how the apartment complex sat behind the 1122 King Road house. So he would be here. And we thought at the time he was just looking through the windows into Maddie and Kaylee's windows. That's very possible. But I also think that it could be more than that. So let's talk about geofencing and Kaylee's Bluetooth for a second. And let me share that with you next. So let's talk about geofencing. And let me move myself out of the way. That's not good. There we go. Okay, that looks a lot better. All right, so let's talk about geofencing and how this could maybe why Ann Taylor's trying to keep out the AT&T phone of Bryan Kohberger. So it's a type of location-based marketing and advertising. So if you've ever gone into a coffee shop or a hospital, or maybe your local grocery store or something like that, or maybe you're shopping at a store, you will often get offered to use their Wi-Fi, right? We see this when we're like having a cup of coffee and we get on our cell phones. We'll be offered a chance to log into their Wi-Fi. Now, even if you do not log into the Wi-Fi, the software, which is called Global Positioning System, a radio frequency identification, Wi-Fi or cellular data that defines that virtual geographical boundary that you cross when you get offered that there to log into their Wi-Fi. This boundary is called a geofence. Now, geofencing is something that law enforcement is using. So what happens is even if you do not say, okay, I want to log into their Wi-Fi, the system still makes a note that you were there. Your phone logs it. So that's one thing why she might want the AT&T phone, Bryan Kohberger's AT&T phone, not to be given out to the public, but also the store or the coffee shop or the hospital. They also get a log of it. It's called a handshake. It's called the handshake. And this is used for marketing. It's really crazy how much information our cell phones tell about us. So it's used for marketing. Like if you walk into a computer store, you might get a text message a few minutes later that says, "Hey, today only buy a laptop and get an e-reader for free." You might see a commercial the next time you log on to the internet regarding something that you were in a store. If you were in an electronics store or a grocery store, maybe you're at the hospital, maybe it'll be an ad for medicines. So I think that how the geofencing works is uses GPS, RFID, Wi-Fi or cellular data. It sets up a geofence, which is that boundary that we just talked about of when you go into the coffee shop, you go into the hospital, you go into the store. When you cross that boundary, it triggers a RFID tag, when you enter and exit that geofence area. That's a virtual boundary. And I believe that the 1122 King Road house, because Kaylee had a Bluetooth, I believe it also had a virtual boundary. And I believe that it's very possible. I don't know. This is, me just taking an educated guess as to why I think Ann Taylor might not want that cell phone to come in, and also some of the apps that are on the cell phone. But it could also be that Kaylee's Bluetooth offered Bryan Kohberger's AT&T phone a handshake, and whether he logged in or not, we don't know. But and maybe he was up there logging into the Bluetooth and looking at pictures of the girls. I don't know. But or he was just sitting there. Allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty. But I'm talking about this in terms of him because it's his defense team that's making all the motions on behalf of him. So anyway, that's what geofencing is. So I hope that explains it. And that may be one of the reasons that Ann Taylor does not want to have his AT&T cell phone come in. So I think that's very possible. And I think it's really, really interesting. So now let's talk about one of the other things, which is Strava. This is one of the other things that I want to talk about in terms of Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger, because I think this is really, really interesting. Okay, so this is the Strava app. Let me line it up so it makes a little bit of more sense. Okay, so this is a fitness app that Bryan Kohberger had on his cell phone. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So I think in addition to the camera and the cell phone tower pings, I think there may also be information on that AT&T phone that shows handshakes from BK's AT&T phone to possibly the 1122 King Road house. There's something on that phone that she doesn't want the jury to see, because remember, if it's good for the defense, they want it in. If it's bad for the defense, they want to take it out. So she also doesn't want any statements made by Bryan Kohberger to come in. And we're going to talk about that in the Amazon account. But first, let's talk about Strava. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Strava, Strava is a fitness app. It's an app that works a lot like GPS, right? It works a lot like GPS, except it monitors a little bit more of your on-the-go information. Even if you're not running the app, it still tracks you in the background, which is, kind of concerning when you think about that, how much information they can gather on you. So it monitors everywhere you go, and law enforcement may be using his AT&T phone and some of the apps that have been downloaded, like Strava, to track his movements using geofencing, but also that Strava app. And I showed you proof last year that showed that he did have that app downloaded to his phone. It monitors everywhere you go. So law enforcement may be able to track his movements, not just that night, not just the next morning, but maybe in the days and weeks leading up to the crimes. That might in some way add another piece to the prosecution puzzle. So in my opinion, Ann Taylor wants to suppress his AT&T information from coming into the trial and coming before the jury, is because she doesn't want to have any geofencing presented to the jury. She doesn't want to have any information collected from the Strava app presented to the jury. The AT&T phone also could have his Instagram account on there. Now, we heard from Steve and Christy Goncalves, and also my source on this is Dateline NBC, that he was following the girls, Kaylee and Maddie, on Instagram. And allegedly, according to Steve and Christy, he was liking all of Maddie's phone photos. So I showed you my sourcing on that. All right, so let's go through next. I want to go through the statements that BK made to law enforcement, and what might be there, and what might not be there. So, but Ann Taylor does not want this let in either. So let me put this. We're going to talk about Bethany and Dylan in just a few moments. I want to talk about Dylan, especially because I do think there is some very, there are some problems with her testimony, right? We found out that she was drinking, that she was having trouble recollecting. So this is something that we're going to talk about how is this going to affect it? How is the defense team going to handle it? And how is the prosecution going to handle it? This is going to be some, speculation on my part, but I still think it's worth going into what we can glean from this hearing. So let's talk about some of the statements. So apparently, when BK was arrested at his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, he did initially sit down with law enforcement. Now, Ann Taylor wants his statements to law enforcement thrown out. Now, my understanding from what I've been able to glean so far on this case is that he did lawyer up fairly quickly, which is, something that I think people should do, right? If you're not sure, get a lawyer. And my understanding was that, and from what I've been able to investigate, BK did not offer up his DNA to exonerate himself. Law enforcement got a court order, and they did the cheek swab, they had a warrant for that. And so that's the DNA that matched in the octillion range to the knife sheath. That's different than the IgG information that was collected out of the trash. So I'm wondering if they maybe locked Bryan Kohberger, law enforcement, locked him in on a couple of questions, like where he was on the night of November 13th and the next day. If they got him to make a couple of statements before he realized he needed to get a lawyer. And if this is why Ann Taylor does not want his statements to come in, he may have just answered a couple of questions, but is it enough to goof up the alibi? Remember, Ann Taylor says he was out that night driving around. He likes to take long drives. He was gazing at the stars and the moon. Now, I think the prosecution's going to come in because it was a foggy night that night. They're going to come in with a weather expert and show that you couldn't really see the stars that night. But, that's a conversation for another day. But it does make you wonder that she didn't want the statements being brought in. What was it in those statements that he said? Did he lock himself into a place and time that's different than the alibi that he's using? Did he lock himself into some other comment that could now be impeached with all of the CCTV camera or video cameras? And we're not going to find that out until the trial. But I think it's interesting to go through her motions, because I think if the defense doesn't want it in, it means it's not good for the defense. And if the prosecution wants it in, then it is good for the prosecution. So I think we can glean some. So I want to talk about another motion that Ann Taylor did, and that was on the Amazon account. BK had an Amazon account. This is another motion that jumped out at me because we have heard from credible sourcing from NBC and Steve Christy Gonzalez that the K-Bar knife was purchased in the spring of 2022, leading up to the crimes, and that it was purchased on Amazon. Now, I showed you guys my sourcing on that, which I've showed you guys in prior videos, but it could even be a search, even if he didn't order the K-Bar knife on Amazon. But my understanding is he did get it in the spring of 2022, but it could also be a search. So what would he be searching for? Because I think if he purchased that knife sheath and they can link him to searches on the knife sheath, I think that's going to be a problem for him. But check this out. This is the other thing that I think maybe why they don't want this Amazon to come in. Remember in the affidavit, we got told about the Dickies receipt, right? And I told you at the time that I thought that this was related back to a jumpsuit. Remember, Bethany saw someone stripping stuff off. She saw somebody that didn't have some things on them. I'm watching my words. I got to watch my words. Keep it G-rated. You guys might have grandchildren or children in the room, so keep it G-rated. But so she saw him take the perpetrator taking off something, and we saw in some of the things that law enforcement gathered this receipt, this Dickies receipt. And I told you guys at the time that I thought it might be related back to a coverall of some type. So let's see if does Dickies have this? Yes, they do. Okay, so they do have it. And there it is in black. So it could be related back to that she doesn't want the Amazon information. It could be that it's the K-Bar knife, or it could be the Dickies jumpsuit. And let's see if we could buy that K-bar knife on Amazon. Just looking really quick. There it is. That's the 8-inch version. So you can get it on Amazon. So it could be he was just shopping and didn't purchase it there, but it could be he purchased it. If he did, yikes, that is really, I can see why Ann Taylor really wants to keep the searches out. So let's go back to the roommates for a second. Okay. Let's go through. Let me check in with chat, and I don't want to get too behind on chat. And then we're going to go through. We're going to talk about Dylan, because I do think what we learned about Dylan is going to be a problem for the prosecution. But we're going to talk about, we talked about the Google searches. We haven't talked about the Google searches that she wants thrown out yet. So we'll do that next. And then we'll talk about Dylan, because we do need to go through that. And I am having a members only live stream after this. Okay, so let's talk about, let me check in with chat and just see if anybody has any questions. And remember, he is innocent until proven guilty. So one does not have it in his personality. He didn't have friends. His ego would not let him do that with anyone. Oh, I think this is in reference to, would he have an accomplice? I think he would have probably acted alone. I agree. I think he was a loner type of personality. Again, allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty. Amy said there's no right to privacy with DNA at a crime scene. And that comes right from the judge, right? The judge said that, and I played that for you guys on Sunday, where he said, he gave a hypothetical, and in his hypothetical, tell me what you guys think about this. Personally, I wouldn't upload my DNA to one of these genealogy sites, because you don't know in 20 years from now or 30 years from now how they could use that information or for what purpose, right? We don't know what's coming in the future. So it was really interesting that there's, no right to, so there's no right to privacy with the DNA. That's, what the judge was saying. What he was saying was that with the genealogy site, this is from the judge, not from me personally, but what he was saying was, in a genealogy site, Bryan Kohberger does, because he's not the one that uploaded his DNA to the genealogy site. The judge asked Ann Taylor, since he's not the one that uploaded his DNA, does Bryan Kohberger have the right to say that an ancestor or distant relative of his have a right to upload their DNA to a genealogy site? So I'm going to ask you, if this was you, do you think one of your distant relatives or ancestors or future ancestors has a right to tell you that you can't upload your DNA to an IgG website if you want to, trace your ancestors through a 123andMe or ancestry.com? Do they have the right to legally tell you can't upload that? I don't think so. So I think the judge is going to deny all of the motions. This is just my opinion. It's an educated guess, but I could be wrong. If you think he's gonna, but I think that definitely the IgG will be let in. And the reason I feel very confident about that is this has already been adjudicated in Judge John Judge's courtroom in Latah County. So it's kind of a been there, done that type of situation. This is our head mod, NJAS. Thank you so much to all of our mods, channel members, and subscribers. So yeah, we have a right to privacy. And I think if it had been BK that uploaded his DNA to an Ancestry 123 or an genealogy site, Ann Taylor might have a better argument than just a relative or ancestor. But I don't know if she's going to have a really strong argument for this with that. So what do you guys think? Lemon Lime says, I'm not the only one that still notices when I come across a white Elantra. Oh, you're still looking for the white Elantra? Yeah, we were all looking for that car. Tish says, so what's with the twist on the judge's statement? The judge's I don't know. I'm not sure what you guys were talking about there. Amanda says, yes, we don't have a constitution in the UK. We probably should. Jay says, there have been a right to privacy for search and seizure of your personal property, including your cell phone. Right. So if law enforcement had gotten Bryan Kohberger's cell phone just at the traffic stop, remember they stopped him twice, he and his dad, when they were driving from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, when Bryan and his dad were driving home for Christmas. I think if they had grabbed his cell phone at that point, I think Ann Taylor would have a better argument with the judge than she does. I think she's probably going to lose the motion. I could be wrong, but I think she's probably going to lose that motion of his cell phone not being fair game because he, but maybe I'm wrong, but because they did have a warrant to search his parents' home, they did have a warrant for his car, they did have a warrant for his apartment. And she was using the example of a traffic stop. But when a police officer pulls you over for a traffic stop, they don't have a warrant on them to search your car. So they can't just grab your cell phone and start searching through it, right? They would have to arrest you, take you down to the courthouse and have some kind of probable cause and get the judge to sign off for a warrant. But this was not that case. That was the scenario she was using to argue her motion. And good on her. She's doing a great job defending Bryan Kohberger. But I think the argument is, I think that he is going to allow the cell phone. The judge is going to allow the cell phone data in because law enforcement did have a warrant to collect things. And I don't know if they found the car at his cell phone at the Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. I don't know if they found it inside his car. I don't know if they found it inside. I don't think it was at his home or his office because those were back in Pullman, Washington. So I'm assuming he had the cell phone with him. I could be wrong, but I think she's going to lose that argument because they did have a warrant at that point. So it's different than when you're just pulled over for a traffic stop, which was the analogy that she used in her argument. And the judge did push back on that a little bit. Yeah, we have a great Facebook group with Brother Mike and Jazz, and they a lot of you guys are in there already. If you type in Reporter Room and Bryan Kohberger, or Reporter Room and Sebastian Rogers, it should pop up. Okay, so let's go through one or two more questions, and we're going to get back into it. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me a thumbs up. Marcy said, in my opinion, she wants all possible evidence suppressed or discarded. Crazy. Well, I mean, that's her job. To be fair to Ann Taylor, that's her job. Her job is she already went through all of this with Judge John Judge in Latah County. So she's just trying again now with this new judge. And that was the other benefit that, Bryan Kohberger got from moving venues. When the Latah County judge agreed with Ann Taylor that it might, that he might not be able to get an unbiased jury in Latah County, then she got to start over with a new judge. Now, I think this is kind of a mixed bag. Tell me what you guys think about this. I think, part of what she's thinking is she gets to relitigate, right? She gets another bite at the apple of trying to get some of these things suppressed, right? Trying to get the genealogy DNA suppressed because Judge John Judge had already ruled on that in Latah County. So she gets another bite at the apple by moving the venue. And I think she was also hoping for a more liberal jury that would be less likely to want to do capital punishment, right? I'm watching my words here, but we all know what that looks like in Idaho. And I just want to be careful because I don't know if you guys have little ones in the room with you. So, she's doing her job. I get tired of her with the super secret. That thing that kind of gets old for me. It just seems like it, there's a lot of that. But she is just doing her job for the most part. So let's see what else you guys say. Amanda says, you Americans have a lot of things right that we lack in the UK, but if you invite law enforcement into your house, it doesn't give them the right to search. No, it does not. And it doesn't give them, if they pull you over for a traffic stop, it doesn't necessarily give them a right to just search your trunk of your car either, right? There has to be probable cause or there has to be a warrant. In this case, they did have a warrant for his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. They did have a warrant for his car. They did have a warrant for his home, and they did have a warrant for his office. Law enforcement did have warrants for those things. So KB doesn't think he has a leg to stand on. How hide down a dark alley. Veronica says, I think the judge will not let her suppress it, any of it. Ann Taylor is pretty transparent. And just thinks that Ann Taylor is throwing spaghetti at the wall. Mary C says, my DNA is public on Ancestry. I have nothing to hide. Yet if it's used to ID a person, relative involved in such a heinous crime, I would be 100% supportive of its use. Yeah, it's interesting that no one has come forward from his family to say that they don't want law enforcement using the DNA. So I think that's, kind of telling. All right, so let's talk about, we're going to talk about Dylan next, but let's talk about a little bit on, I do feel like we got, she did inadvertently leak some, circumstantial evidence that went beyond just the DNA, the cell phone and video surveillance that we, knew about, the eyewitness account by Dylan, the observation by investigators of suspicious activity. And what I'm talking about is they were watching him. When they arrested him, he was wearing medical grade gloves, separating his garbage from his parents' garbage. And law enforcement had been watching Bryan Kohberger walk from his parents' driveway. And if you've seen that house, you can see that it's not right. The driveways aren't next door to each other. It's not like a condo or a townhouse or even a smaller house neighborhood. There's like a half acre, looking lot there. Maybe it's a quarter acre. I don't know, but it's a good sized lot. So to go to but he was seen by law enforcement because they had him under surveillance, walking down to the neighbor's trash and putting his own trash in there. Now, once you throw your garbage away, law enforcement can get it. They're allowed to legally get it. Okay, let's move on to Dylan. So this, I think, is going to be a problem for the prosecution. Let's talk about this next. Let me move myself out of the way here. I'm still in the way. Let's see. That's better. Okay, so let's talk about Dylan. We learned some new things about her that I think are really important. And then we're going to go through defense tactics. Is Ann Taylor using all of the tactics at her disposal or not? I think it's definitely worth looking at. So we learned some new information on, well, Bethany, those of you that have been with my channel, we talked about the information about the man Bethany saw last year. I addressed it in multiple videos last year, but we heard it from the judge this year. So I can't wait to see the transcripts in 14 days to go through those to see what else we could find out. So Ann Taylor wants to have what Bethany saw thrown out as well. She wants that to be thrown out. And she feels like, she used the word super secret, giant secret, like over and over. It's to me, it was just felt like a little bit of gaslighting, but that's just my opinion. And you're certainly entitled to yours. I do think she's doing a good job for Bryan Kohberger, but she talked about Dylan and she said, quote, there are 2 references to not remembering a couple of days later in a third interview. Remember, I told you I thought that I had heard that Dylan had a really rough interview with law enforcement, that she and Bethany were like, they weren't just interviewed, they were interrogated by law enforcement. So now we found out that there was at least 3 interviews. So Ann Taylor says a couple of days later in the third interview, there are references to not remembering being drunk. This is according to Ann Taylor, a statement of, I don't know any of it. Like half the stuff, I don't know if it was a dream or if it was real. And I'm sure it had to feel like a nightmare. And credibility is really, really important when this person was relied on in the investigation. Well, I still think that the prosecution is going to put Dylan on. And I still think the fact that she described a man that was a little over 6 feet tall, around 6 feet tall or a little bit taller. She's tall, right? She described somebody wearing all black with a mask on, with bushy eyebrows, who was slim, athletic built, but not muscular. That's how she described the perpetrator. That description was still accurate. So, what Ann Taylor wants to say is, she doesn't feel like Dylan's description can be relied on. I don't know. I think the judge is going to let Dylan testify. I don't know. You, we're going to talk about some tactics, that I think Ann Taylor can employ to, control this. And I think, she can really go after Dylan on the cross examination. She also added that the roommates had told police that she had been drinking. She also, and you know what? They were all drinking. And this is, the thing with trials. You don't get to pick your witnesses and you don't get to pick your victims, right? Because I see a lot of times in crimes, there's a lot of, blame the victim. How short was her skirt? That kind of thing. But we don't get to pick our victims and we don't get to pick our witnesses either when you're a prosecution or a defense, right? So she said the roommate told the police she had been drinking and she also heard one of the victims come up and down the stairs during the time of the attack. And we don't know if it was her, that she heard BK and she thought it was one of the roommates going up the stairs. So this is how I think it happened. I think that the perpetrator let himself in through the patio door and that he left the patio door open because he didn't want to leave extra DNA and also wanted a quick escape. I think the DoorDash delivery had already been delivered to Xana and she was in her room eating her food. I think the perpetrator went upstairs, and we know Dylan opened her door 3 times during this. But remember, Ethan and Xana did not call 911 either. It wasn't just the roommates that didn't call 911. Ethan and Xana also didn't call 911. So was it the way sound traveled in that house due to the exterior wall that I showed you on Sunday? The way that the second and third floor and the second floor and first floor were together? Is it because it happened so fast that Bethany and Kaylee didn't scream and it just was just really, really quick? That's what we don't know, and we'll have to wait to the trial to find out. But Ann Taylor says that the information was never provided to the judge at the time, laying the groundwork for her to question the beginning of the investigation and the collection of evidence, including DNA. She really wants to get that DNA out that authorities say was found on the button snap of a knife sheath at the crime scene. Now, I've seen some people, Ann Taylor was arguing that, that law enforcement didn't have a warrant to collect the knife sheath. But the judge pointed out, and I already made a video on this, so I'm not going to rehash it too much, but he pointed out to her, he just asked some pointed questions. But basically, what he was pointing out was that law enforcement doesn't need a warrant to collect evidence at a crime scene. They need a warrant to search up somebody, perpetrators or a potential suspect office, their home, their car, their parents' home. They need warrants for that. But when you're called to a crime scene, they don't need a warrant to get shoe prints, fingerprints. They don't need a warrant for that, especially if the roommates, gave them permission to come in. BK doesn't have standing on the 1122 King Road house. So Ann Taylor doesn't have standing to say that law enforcement needed a warrant for that. And the judge really did push back on that. But I do think the fact that Dylan had been drinking is going to be a problem for the prosecution. And I think the judge will let her testimony in. I think it will stand. And then defense will have a fair crack at the apple and that they can go back in and go after her and her credibility with the drinking. Now, Ann Taylor said that information was never provided. So she's using Dylan as to try to get the DNA out. And you can just tell how devastating this DNA that was collected from the cheek swab from BK, that was linked back to that knife sheath, which was found underneath into the side of Maddie, how devastating Ann Taylor feels like that evidence is, because she is working really, really hard at every angle she can think of to try to get that DNA evidence thrown out. So the investigative genealogy link to Bryan Kohberger, this my source on this is ABC. Ann Taylor says is flawed, but again, I just don't see where and I don't think the judge is going to see it this way either. I just don't see where Bryan Kohberger is going to have standing to say that a relative or ancestor was not allowed to upload their DNA to a DNA ancestry type of website. So this is now from ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckman, and he said, quote, the investigative Genetic genealogy, or the IgG, is the process by which law enforcement will take a sample of DNA and initially probably run it through what's CODIS. Now, that's the FBI criminal website, right, or federal criminal database. Now, we did hear Ann Taylor talk about this, so I think they did that first. And if there's not a hit, then law enforcement can take that DNA to a genetic genealogy database and see if they can take information from that database to see if that sample is related to someone. And what they got was it was related to Bryan Kohberger's father. That's how it came back. And that's how they narrowed in. And that's, on Bryan Kohberger. So his DNA was matched from garbage pulled from the Pennsylvania Poconos neighborhood. Now, they waited, law enforcement did, until the trash people picked up the trash. I feel like they dotted every I and crossed every T. And they waited until the garbage was picked up before they pulled the truck over to get the trash. So they didn't take it themselves off the curb, because then the argument could have been made by Ann Taylor that it wasn't really garbage. It wasn't really being disposed of. And therefore, they would have needed a warrant for that. But once you dispose of something and put it out for the trash, and the trash people collect it, it's considered fair game in most states, including Idaho. So Ann Taylor says, I think it's interesting you have the FBI telling the trash man what to do. Well, I mean, they told the trash man to pull over. They wanted the trash. So she said, this is Buckmeyer. This is the legal analyst for the news outlet. Says, quote, an individual has no expectation of privacy as to what they throw in the trash. And so law enforcement wouldn't need to get a warrant to check what they call as an abandonment sample. So once you throw it in the garbage, law enforcement could have gotten it from the curb, but they didn't want to take a chance of the family saying it wasn't really put out for trash. It was just being stored there at the end of the driveway. So they waited until the trash truck picked it up, and then they immediately stopped the truck. And we didn't know this till this motion that Ann Taylor put in, and got that trash that way. Now the prosecution clapped back to Ann Taylor. They said that no rights were violated, and that they relayed the evidence based on what they knew at the time. They said, this is Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Ashley Jennings said, quote, there was nothing obtained that violated the defendant's constitutional rights. She said, the defendant has failed to submit any false statement or admission without which the magistrate would not have found probable cause. She said the proceedings were private for the most part. So that's why the judge is going to go ahead and release it. And then we can find out. I hope we get to find out who redacted what too. I would like to know, who redacted what, because that will give us some more clues. So the hearing did continue Friday. Okay, so I hope that kind of addressed that, and how I feel like Dylan's So I feel like Dylan is going to have some credibility issues. I do feel like I also think the judge is going to let her testimony come in. And I don't think it's going to be enough to keep her testimony out. I do think that the judge is going to come in. Next, we're going to go through recognizing defense strategies and look to see, well, what is Ann Taylor employing and how is this helping the case? So let me just check in with chat really quick, and then we're going to dive into defense strategies. What strategies are we seeing being deployed? What will we see being utilized? What can we expect to see in the August 2025 Bryan Kohberger trial? Michelle says, I assume that the blood on the rail was tested against BK's DNA and found not to be his, but someone else's. I think so too. A lot of people have said the DNA wasn't tested. The DNA wasn't tested. We don't know that yet. So I'm like urging caution there. I think the fact that we know that it was a male, it could have been Ethan's DNA that was found. I mean, we don't know whose DNA was it. It was a party house. So, Ann Taylor will definitely have a chance to address that at the trial. But I'm urging caution there that we just don't know whose it was. But to assume that it's not tested isn't fair either, because we know it was tested, because we know it was belonged to a male. If they just saw that and didn't test any DNA from that handprint, well, then okay. But we know it's a male, so we know it was tested. So I think it's like, it's not really fair to say that law enforcement didn't test it. We don't know that yet. We'll find out. We haven't heard from the prosecution on that yet. So I think once we hear from the prosecution at the trial about that, or the defense and the prosecution has to refute it, because Ann Taylor, by all means, can bring that up. She can bring that up and raise reasonable doubt with that. So yeah, great point, Michelle. Becky says, if his iPhone was in a common area like that iPad, then they would have needed another warrant to take that at that point. Yeah. It depends where, maybe. It depends what the scope of the warrant is, and it depends on where they found the iPhone. Now, maybe that's one of the things why she didn't want his car searched. They had a warrant to search his car. Maybe the iPhone was in his vehicle. I mean, we don't know, and we might be able to figure it out when when the judge releases in 14 days the transcript of the hearings that we were not allowed to see. Now, that should tell us a lot more. Jay says, and I think the cell phone evidence is probably pretty strong to show he's guilty or was at the crime scene and is not just circumstantial. I think it's concerning for the defense, because she is doing everything she can to keep it out. And I think Dylan, even though she was drinking, and I told you, I thought, she could have been impaired. She could have taken an Ambien. A lot of people were like, how did she go back to sleep after that? There's been a lot of shade thrown at the roommates, but they were out drinking that night. They're young. Dylan was the youngest roommate in the house. If she was drunk, she could have just been annoyed to see a man. You don't see a man in the hall at a party house and immediately jump to, all my roommates are being done away with, right? We'll have to wait but Ann Taylor, I think the judge will let Dylan's testimony come in. And I think Ann Taylor should, because I think it'll give her a good chance to try to impeach Dylan based on the fact that she was drinking. But Ann Taylor wants to use the fact that Dylan was drinking to keep the DNA out, that IgG genealogy DNA out, or the knife sheath DNA out. She because it all comes from that. So she's just going back and trying to find anything she can use. And that's her job. She's doing a great job. So I'm not throwing any shade at Ann Taylor. This is Ann Taylor's best job. Yeah, exactly. And Denjas thinks that the print found may belong to one of the students who came over the next morning and went to check on Kaylee and Maddie. It could be. Remember, Ethan's friends came over. This is a really good theory, and Jazz. Ethan's friends came over. There's been a lot of people that said the roommates didn't call for 8 hours. Well, yeah, they went to sleep. And they woke up because Ethan had plans. He had spent the night with Xana, or maybe he was just going to stay over there for a little bit and was going to come home. But he had plans with his friends the next day. So Ethan's friends went to the 1122 King Road house looking for him because they had plans, because he wasn't answering his cell phone. So they're like, oh, he's with Xana. Well, we'll go get him. When they got to the house, they woke up one of the roommates. I'm assuming it was Bethany, because she slept on the ground floor. And we know Dylan was on the second floor. And we also heard in some of the stuff in the hearings that it was Bethany that answered the door. And so it could have been that the roommate, the friend of Ethan's, came in and could have seen Ethan and Xana and then started to go upstairs to look for Kaylee Maddie. It could be a law enforcement person touched the wall. I mean, we don't know yet, and we're not going to know till we get. We might find out some more in 14 days, but we're not going to know for sure till we get to the trial. Amanda says, but forget UK; it's not as relevant here with this crime. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives, though, from different countries. Amanda, I do like that. Liar Slayer says all evidence points at one person and one person only. Sue Joy says Ann Taylor's argument regarding the right to privacy is more of a Supreme Court issue. It's law now. Can try to change that with the new legislation. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think she is, and this goes right along with what Latah County Judge John Judge gave too, which is that she wanted to change Idaho's state law. she wanted him to change it by saying that it had to be beyond a reasonable doubt, even with the grand jury indictment, right? So yeah, I think you're right, Sue Joy, that this would be more of a Supreme Court issue. I don't think it's that case law in Idaho or the Supreme Court is going to be overturned. I don't think so, but we'll see. Becky says the judge also ordered in his court for the prosecution to turn over all IGG for that in the camera viewing, and they didn't and still haven't. Well, I think they turned over the IGG data, but what Ann Taylor wants to know is what investigator did what. And from what I heard, the prosecution said they were still waiting from this was a few months ago, but the prosecution was saying they were still waiting for the FBI to get back with them on that. They were still waiting for that. Truth Exposed says, I think that when the DA, defense, and judge made a decision to allow the house released, it could be torn down. New Judge John Judge was retiring, and there wouldn't be a change of venue. That there would be a change of venue anyway. I don't know. I just think that Ann Taylor. I mean, remember, originally the trial was supposed to go forward with a preliminary hearing, and initially Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger, had said something about her client had been in court for 2 years. Well, yeah, she waived her right to a speedy trial on behalf of Bryan Kohberger. She waived his right, not her right, his right to a speedy trial, right? So she waived that. Now, Scott Reich, who's a criminal defense attorney, he has a channel called Crime Talk. He had said last year that he thought that was a massive mistake. And just looking at all of the terabytes. Think about how much information your computer has, like files. Does it have terabytes? And there's multiple terabytes of information. Just in seeing what the prosecution and the defense team had to go through in terabytes, that he thinks Ann Taylor should not have waived BK's right to a speedy trial, that her best chance would have been to force the state to go forward with a fast trial, because he doesn't think the state was ready. So I think if we were like a month out to the trial, and remember, we saw this in the Rust case, right? So if the prosecution does anything shady, like try to hide stuff from the defense, now that doesn't mean that Ann Taylor gets to see everything ahead of time. The judge will decide what they get to see, what they don't get to see. And the same thing with the prosecution of what they get to see from the defense. That's why we have a neutral person, a judge deciding. So it will be interesting to see what he decides on that. But yeah, great points, you guys. I love reading your questions. I learn from you guys. Amanda says, I'm personally interested in how crime is investigated compared to the UK. I think you guys are better than the UK. We are too soft. I don't know about that. Blazon Asian. Oh, that's what a pretty name. They knew what was going down, and they knew BK. I don't know who they is. If you're talking about the roommates, I mean, Ann Taylor will, if that's the case, Ann Taylor will certainly have a chance to cross-examine them if they knew what was happening. But I'm urging caution here, because, just even hearing Ann Taylor's characterization of Dylan tells me that she didn't know what was going down. She said she was drunk. This is according to Ann Taylor, not me. This is what Ann Taylor says that the testimony or the transcripts say. So, or, I think that Ann Taylor will definitely have a chance to impeach here. And I think she'll make good use of it. Let's see who else. If we have, Brian says they want the Amazon search suppressed because they have proof he purchased the knife and the sheath. No reason to suppress otherwise. Yeah, I think it's going to be the knife or the sheath. I agree with you. Or it's going to be something like maybe it could be that the Dickies. We saw that Dickies receipt. It could be the jumpsuit, the monkey suit. And remember, I showed you the article, and now we heard about it from the judge, and we've heard about it from Ann Taylor that Bethany did in that affidavit that I showed you at the beginning of the live stream. If you missed it, you can back up the live stream when we're done and watch it. But I showed you the affidavit from Ann Taylor's private investigator that shows that Bethany did see someone stripping off things and putting it into a bag. So anyway, very, very interesting. Lori says, how much did she drink? What did she drink? Yeah, well, that's going to be something where, what was her tolerance? Did she eat prior to seeing the bushy-eyed guy? Right. Exactly. Well, that's where Ann Taylor will get a chance to try to impeach Dylan on the stand. But I hear people that are like, saying the roommates were involved or something like this. I think that I don't think that's right. They're not under investigate. They're not under investigation. They haven't been that we know of. They haven't been arrested. They haven't been charged with any crimes. So I think, we should be really careful not to um not to say that they were involved in some way or that they knew. I don't think that's fair because they are stuck under a gag order that was imposed by Ann Taylor on behalf of Bryan Kohberger. So they can't even speak out to defend themselves. They're just, because we have this gag order, it's left like this gap where people can attribute anything to the roommates. And I don't think that's really fair either. So I'm just urging caution. Bryan Kohberger is entitled to the presumption of innocence, and he's been arrested and in jail. But Bethany and Dylan haven't been charged with anything. So they definitely are the same people who are saying BK deserves the presumption of innocence. Then we should also be giving the same thing, and more than that, because they haven't even been arrested, to the roommates, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But Ann Taylor will definitely have a chance to go in and take Dylan and Bethany apart on the stand. And I think it'll be a really tough cross examination. Dig the Past says DM's original statement was redacted. Does that redact her sling? I don't know what is Dylan's alibi. She tells us she was in her room. She was in her room. Thanks, long relaxing bids. I really appreciate the hearts. All right, Princess Elsa's here. Hi, Princess, and welcome. You're one of our newest channel members. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do the next part. We're going to go through defense tactics and what we can expect to see in the trial. But let me just do this really quick. Let me just do a shout out to the producers, George Brown, and Jazz, Sasha Angel, Not So Saintly, Debbie Joe, and Jane J, and to our channel members. Thank you guys so much for your support and kindness in supporting our channel. I really appreciate it. I am doing a channel members only live stream next. And I'm going to do a Q&A and a deep dive into this, but we still have to go through defense tactics next. But I do want to make sure I do thank everybody. And Princess Elsa and Frida Hopkins are our newest channel members. And then thank you. And Pepper also. And then thank you. Super thanks, gratitude to Brother Mike and Jazz, Michael Cole. And thank you, and Jazz, for gifted channel memberships. I didn't say everybody. Holly Golightly, Graceful Dance, Series Block, and Sophie. Thank you so much, you guys. All right, so let's get back to defense tactics. So let me share this with you. Let me move myself to the side. Yeah, that's too there. Okay, let's go that way. Okay. So this is what I think we can expect to see. This is tactics that defense attorneys use, and some of the strategies we're seeing now. And to be effective in, I think it's going to be interesting as people who are watching this trial. I think it's going to be nice to kind of be in the know. If you like to have all the information so you can make up your own mind, Reporter Room is a critical thinkers channel, so we don't always all agree. I don't try to tell you guys that what everything I say is right or everything that you say is right. What I try to say is I just give you all the information that I have. I give you it from a perspective. I am giving my opinions and perspective on the information. If you just wanted to read straight up news, you could link on any of the news links and read straight up news. But I think you're coming for a perspective. So I am giving that. So I think this would be even more information that will help us, like cross-examination strategies that fall in. Now, prosecution could use this too. But I'm going to talk more about this in terms of defense because we're talking about Ann Taylor today and her motions. But they break these into two categories: tactics and tricks. And a tactic is a method used by an attorney who believes the witness is lying. So we might see this employed against Bethany or Dylan. Its purpose is to expose the lie and get to the truth. Now that differs from a trick. A trick is used by an attorney who knows that the witness is telling the truth. that the truth hurts his or her case, and that attorney tries to make it appear that the witness is lying or incompetent or tries to make the facts different from what they actually are. Tricks are something that our jury is going to have to sift through and figure out what's a tactic by the prosecution, what's a trick, what's a tactic by the defense team, what's a trick. Tricks are something that you have to face almost every time you testify. If you learn to recognize and deal with them, you can keep control of your testimony away from a defense attorney and keep it in your own hands. So I thought this was really an interesting article and definitely worth going through to see some of the tactics. Now, I think we will see these employed not just by Ann Taylor, but also the prosecution when they cross-examine witnesses. So it can be used by attorneys to ask you questions that require an explanation, but then try to limit your answers to a simple yes or no. Now, a good judge, we saw this in the Alex Murdaugh case, a good judge will overrule this and will say, let the witness answer. So a lot of times you'll see the prosecutor or the defense attorney object to the other side's trying to limit to a yes or no to allow the witness to answer. Or the judge will say, let them answer, and then you can come up on your, when you get it, when you want to interview the witness, when you want to cross-examine the witness or examine the witness, you can come up on your turn and you can bring it out then. So it depends on the judge. But this distorting or orchestrating questions in the way of just a yes or no answer can create a false impression. So as people who are going to be watching this trial and other trials, we want to not fall for tactics like this and just know that the jury has a right to get an explanation, a complete answer, the whole truth, not just part of the truth. So this is coming from a defense attorney who says one of their favorite to get asked all the time was, quote, now, or maybe this is a law enforcement officer who is, I think this is a article by police for police. Okay. So one of the tactics I used to get asked all the time was, now, officer, you didn't advise my client of his Miranda rights before you began to interrogate him, did you? So what the attorney's looking for is a simple yes or no. And both know it wasn't necessary to, you don't have to advise a defendant that's not under arrest of their Miranda rights. But a jury doesn't know this, and the chances are they won't find out unless you tell them. So this officer says they'll explain it like this, quote, the suspect wasn't in custody when I was talking to him or her. It wasn't necessary for me to use Miranda warnings. Or if it's appropriate, quote, your client just started talking before I had the chance to ask him any questions. I just let him talk. So whatever the case may be, because remember, Ann Taylor wants statements by Bryan Kohberger excluded. Now, she didn't bring up Miranda, so I'm assuming they did Mirandize him. Another tactic is a play on words, and law enforcement is talking about this in terms of defense attorneys, but this can be a prosecuting attorney tactic as well if they're cross-examining someone. But turning the tables on a yes or no strategy is to paraphrase your testimony and change your testimony. This is from a law enforcement officer who wrote this article. Change the testimony of the police officer to give a different impression of what you actually said. He'll say, quote, so you're saying that, or, quote, to put it in words, quote, or let me summarize your testimony. So if you hear these words or any similar words come out of an attorney, whether it be the prosecutor or the defense attorney, pay really close attention to what that person is going to say next. And if you are on the stand, be prepared to correct them. If you're not on the stand and you're watching it on television, see if the witness corrects it, or if the opposing attorney gets up and tries to rehabilitate the witness to make that correction. So that's another tactic. Another tactic is misdirection. And sometimes attorneys will focus on something insignificant that you did or did not fail to do, or blow it out of proportion in hopes of diverting the attention away from the evidence. So look at this shiny object over here. We saw this done really effectively in the O.J. Simpson trial, right? Where he was found not guilty, and if the glove didn't fit, you must acquit, even though the glove had been damp, and we don't know if his fingers were spread when he was trying to put it on. We don't know. But questions from about the crime scene, such as what channel was the TV turned to are used to misdirect the person giving the evidence by trying to say that they don't know everything. The other tactic that I see is when we have one police officer who actually investigated X, Y, and Z, but another police officer is asked about it. Well, they didn't investigate that particular piece of information, so they don't know about it. So they'll just say, "I don't know," and that's the best thing to do if But a lot of good attorneys will use misdirection, um, coming from police officers' mistakes, the I don't knows or omissions. So you want to make sure when you're watching, are you looking at something that's real or are you looking at a misdirection? Another technique that attorneys use is the confusion technique. They'll ask witnesses, particularly police officers, to describe things that can't adequately be described in words. So red flags should fly if you're being asked to describe something you can't describe, because then you look stupid if you try. Um, just say that you can't describe whatever the person is asking you to describe. So if you weren't in that room or you didn't see that particular piece of evidence, the best answer to give is, I don't know. Another confusion technique is the hypothetical or what if type of questions. If you see an attorney, um, if so let's say this is the example that's given. If the defendant wasn't in custody when you questioned him, sans Miranda, the lawyer could say, quote, if my client had said he wanted to leave, what would you have let him? So that's in whatever form these questions take. These are always asking the police officer to speculate on something that didn't happen. So what they're recommending is don't give a hypothetical answer. Just simply say that never came up, or I can't answer that because it didn't happen. So that's another confusion technique. Another one is full auto. And I think this is the last one we're going to do. And then I'm going to go over and do the members only live stream. But full auto, this is my term for questions fired at you in a rapid stream with barely enough time to answer in between. Most of the time, the prosecution will object to this. But the attorney, what they're trying to do, we've seen prosecutors do this too, not just defense attorneys, but they want to control the pace of the testimony. They want to try to intimidate the person who's testifying. They want to try to manipulate it. We saw this used really effectively in the Alex Murdaugh case when the prosecutor was cross-examining Alex Murdaugh. He was just like bam, bam, bam with the questions. And he did, trip up Alex Murdaugh, and he, in my opinion, did discredit him because Alex Murdaugh was found guilty. So I'm really curious what you guys think about that. I will post a video on the what Bethany saw tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. I think I am going to leave it there. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And I look forward to drop me a question in the comment section below. And I look forward to answering your questions over the next few days. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you again to our head mod and Jazz, all of our mods, all of our subscribers, all of our channel members, and all of you, our viewers. I really appreciate your taking time out of your day to come by and spend a little time with me. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.